This year marks 70 years since the death of Eva Perón from cancer, aged just 33. She was the glamorous wife of Argentine President Juan Domingo Perón, and she had risen from poverty through fame as an actress to become a huge political force alongside her husband. She was given a state funeral and is still revered in Argentina. In the 1970s, Tim Rice became fascinated by her and worked out the concept for a musical, which would become the smash hit Evita, with music by Andrew Lloyd Webber. One commentator wrote this: Evita Perón symbolises certain naive but effective beliefs, the hope for a better world, a life sacrificed on the altar of the disinherited, the humiliated, and the poor of the earth. They are myths which somehow reproduce the image of Christ. Well, was that the attraction to the writers? Sir Tim is with me now. Lovely to see you. Good morning.
Very nice to be here.
You've probably told the story many, many times before, but tell me how you first thought of writing about Evita.
Well, I first heard of Eva Perón when I was about 9, because she was on the Argentine stamps. And the Argentine stamps featuring an attractive woman. It was quite unusual in those days to have any country doing that. And I kind of forgot about her for the next 20 years, or not quite 20, 15 years. And then I heard a radio programme about her by chance on Radio 4. And I suddenly thought, Eva Perón, I know a little bit about her. Nobody knew anything about her in this country as far as I could see at that time. And the more I listened to the programme, I listened to the repeat, because I only caught the end of it in my car. And I then got hold of a TV documentary about her and tried to research as much as I could. And the more I researched, the more I became fascinated by this woman who, as you described, was a working class, illegitimate daughter of a working class family, and rose to become the most powerful woman in Argentina. And it's an amazing story. And she died aged only 33, and as you say, is still revered. So it had all the ingredients, really.
Well, yes and no. I mean, this is where your genius is, because you've said that no one had heard of her, meaning no one in Europe and no one particularly in the United States, where your musical was likely to play and be popular. And also, to the extent that anybody did know anything about her, she'd been to visit General Franco in Spain. And so she was at least linked with fascism. And by the way, just to remind ourselves, you were doing this in the mid-1970s. General Franco only died in 1975. Salazar in Portugal, 76, 70, I can't remember, around that period.
Yes.
So actually, we still had fascism in Europe. How did you take the leap to think that you could do a musical about a woman who was thought to be fascist, and that was probably the only thing we knew about her?
Well, we were criticised before we'd even let the show loose on the world for writing about something that nobody knew anything about, whereas that was why it would not work. And our previous show, Jesus Christ Superstar, we were criticised because everybody knew the story, so therefore that wouldn't work. So the answer is, if you've got a good story and if you tell it reasonably well, and I think 40 years later I can claim we did tell it quite well, and of course I was well aware of her murky side, as well as her saintly side, if you like, seen from the Argentine point of view. But that, again, was of enormous appeal. You had two sides of the argument, and as playwrights considerably greater than I have said, if you can... I mean, the great thing about writing a play or a musical is that you can present both sides of the argument. And that's what we were able to do using the character of Che Guevara, who I discovered, having started work on Evita, was also Argentine. I thought he was Cuban. I mean, my own knowledge of Latin American history wasn't great until I began researching. And it's so true that hardly anybody in Great Britain, certainly, perhaps a bit in Spain, obviously, but very few people in Great Britain knew anything about Eva Perón at all. So they didn't think of her as a fascist or anything. But the fascism, I mean, Perón claimed to try and steer a way between fascism and communism. He, called it the third way, and it didn't really work. He ended up, once Eva went, he only lasted another 2 or 3 years before he was thrown out, although he did come back, briefly.
What was your attitude to the truth? Was it important to you to tell the truth, or did you think, this is a musical, this person is dead, we don't need to tell exactly the truth? What was your attitude to that?
Well, I think I was trying to be truthful. But, of course, with someone like Eva Perón, what is truth? As Pontius Pilate said in our other show. I mean, everybody, we all have truths. The question is your truth the same as my truth? And I'm very much torn between being a fan of Eva Perón and thinking she was an extremely murky person. There was certainly...
What was the murkiness, by the way? Because we've heard about the good side of her.
Yes, I mean the fact that people tended to disappear, but and anybody who opposed Perón and the way that he marshalled the workers against the so-called aristocracy ruling classes. But I don't think at the time when Eva was alive, I don't think that they were any worse than the average dictator. I mean, the thing about Eva Perón was that she was glamorous as well, and I think she was a big factor in the huge attraction of Peronism. I mean, clearly she was. I remember the first question I was ever asked about Evita in the interview was, haven't you written, how can you glamorize this unpleasant woman? And I said, well, the fact that she was glamorous is the story. If she was not glamorous, it would not be as interesting a story as it is. She was very much a political figure, but that was dwarfed by her incredible personal appeal. And she played her cards very cleverly. She aimed at the class from which she kept saying, I came from this class, I'm wearing these jewels for you. I mean, it was dishonest, but at the same time, in a way, truthful. I mean...
May I